So today we'll be joined by Jen Cormier, who is a grief doula who helps us to understand how to navigate grief through grace and or navigating grief with grace. And I think that's a really important thing. During the holiday season, we find that um, there's things that are missing. Holidays are really hard for a lot of people, and what we forget is how to incorporate the people who are missing, the ancestors who have left us, um, and incorporate their wisdom and their traditions into our traditions. Sometimes we'll do that with food, right? We'll bring in grandma's recipes so that we can remember the warmth that we felt when we were kids and we're eating such delicious things. Or we take it by, incorporating ornaments or incorporating um, just different things that we've done that we've grown up with and known to be the way that we want to operate. So all of those things are ways to incorporate things, but then there are other things. There are things that like soldiers experience, people losing their best friends and people losing in situations that feel very much like they were out of their control, because death is almost always out of our control, even though we want to be able to control it. Um, and so when things happen too fast for our nervous system to tap into, we feel trauma, we feel sadness, we feel sometimes depressed, we feel sometimes anxiety. Because we feel like our nervous systems can feel like something is happening that's beyond our control and never was in our control. And we don't know what to do now because we don't know how to operate in the world safely. And that's when anxiety starts to pop in. So it becomes something really challenging to consider. How do you navigate that? One of the things that popped up today, I was on a call with a colleague and she experienced a very traumatic event, work related. And it was so intense. Like the feeling of being threatened felt so intense that it was hard for her to make any movement forward. All she could say is, all I can do is rest right now. All I can do is take a break. And when we dug into why she was taking a break, um, she came up with these words of like, I'm feeling like an imposter. I'm feeling like I'm not worthy. I'm feeling like I don't have any expertise. And I'm feeling like all of these things. And, she obviously had expertise in her field. She'd been doing it for many, many years, won many awards in her profession. But, because something happened that was very negative and shifted her sense of balance, her sense of equilibrium and being able to serve her community, she doubted herself to the point of not being able to do anything. And um, that's a nervous system thing. It's a I feel unbalanced in how I'm operating in the world sort of thing. And once we can understand that that's how things show up, then we can make a decision about how to change that, how to shift that, and how to keep moving forward. So, uh, just telling that story as we wait for Jen to come in and talk about grief and grace. Reverend Jen, thanks for showing up.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Adhana.
Yes. So I introduced you to our community as so I when we first met many years ago, I feel like you described yourself as a grief doula and even a death doula, helping people understand what it is to experience loss and to work through and move through that space with grace.
Yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit more about what that means to you or how you describe yourself now?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've gone through a couple of actually three different doula certifications, a birth doula training, two different death doula trainings that work with conscious dying and green burial and home funeral and teaching people their legal rights. And I feel really passionate about supporting people through these portals of transition. as we move through, like the two biggest ones, right, are birth and death, like when we're coming in and when we're going out. And then I also focused on, soulful, unique wedding ceremony for a while. That was my main focus, helping blended families come together in a really unique way and honoring that in a really, special ritual. Then we have, coming of age ceremonies and elder ceremonies and all of these different thresholds, which, in our sort of general culture, I think we miss a lot of opportunities to honor these threshold moments when we not only can be celebrating, but also grieving, because every time we hit a crossroad in life, there's a letting go and then there's something new. So there are many different, spiritual traditions, indigenous cultures, places where there are honorings of, coming of age ceremonies, elder ceremonies, different things where, if we don't have that if we don't maybe have that in a spiritual community, a religious community, a familial community, we can kind of feel a little bit adrift. We could think of, okay, we've got, when people turn 21, they drink. When they're 18, there's a high school graduation or college graduation, or, sort of those moments where we're celebrating, hey, I finished this big thing. But then often we feel like, now what? And now what do I do? And I'm supposed to be really happy because I'm a college graduate, but now I have to go be a real adult. And what does that mean? And how do I function? So there are a lot of these happy threshold moments that we then feel like, I don't know who I am. There's like an identity like shift. For motherhood, for example, there's a lot of, postpartum depression where it's like, you should be happy, you're a mother. And then it's like, I don't know, we're not necessarily getting all the support that we need to successfully make that bridge into that new thing. So I was not expecting to say all that, but all of that just came out of my mouth. So I would just say, you just asked me how I would define myself now. I help people through life transition moments. And that is a weaving of some grief work and also celebration and also purpose, and also ways to, find meaningful ritual and daily habits to really fully embrace these new ways of being. So that's a lot of the work that I do with my clients now.
I love that. You said all of that, but I think all of that needed to be said because you brought up like 5 different types of life transitions that we don't typically have a lot of ritual around, right? We talk about birth, you talk about, what happens to the mom after the birth, you talk about, dying, you talk about the transition. I think about, for soldiers, these people in my community, the idea of taking down or putting down that identity of a soldier and moving into the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
Pretty similar to that college graduate, like, what do I do now? Like, I was doing all this other stuff. I built a whole thing. I accomplished so much. And yet and still, like, now I'm going to the world having done that thing, but the world doesn't necessarily know what to do with that. I have to know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there, that transition may have, trauma woven in. It might not be traumatic, but it is just disorienting because we're working with an identity shift. And I've worked with folks who maybe they've come to me because their parent died, but then they're also moving through retirement, for example. And that is very disorienting because it was like, I was this my whole life, kind of like what you're saying with folks in uniform. I was soldier, I was Marine, I was whatever. And now who am I? Like now I have to be something else. And I'm not really in that skin yet. So how do we hold ourselves? How do we have communities of support, rituals of support to make that transition in a successful way?
Yeah. Mm. That's really it's really something to consider because I don't know that we have a lot of tradition other than like, you have a retirement ceremony and then what, right?
It's like a party, like, woohoo, you retired,
That
have
was 30 years of my life, 20
have
years of
this
my life, whatever it is, right?
basket, right? After decades. And now, and some people, have an easier time than others. Like we're all different, in
Mhm.
every way that we grieve is different, every loss is different. So, just giving anyone who's listening permission, no matter what you're going through, if you're going through the grief of someone in your life who died, or you lost a job or a home or an identity or whatever that is, your process of letting that go is going to look different with every transition, because you're also a different person because you're in a new place. And also it's going to be different. Each person has a unique, like our fingerprints, a unique way that we're going to be with each of those things. So no, there's no wrong way to do it. um,
Mhm.
and the more support we can get, the better. And that can
Yeah,
look like a lot of things.
yeah. And we have to think about this in terms of this next month of holidays,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So people are going to be gathering for family gatherings this week. They're going to be
Mhm.
doing family gatherings in December, various types.
Yeah.
And they're going to be having family gatherings with fewer people than they had last year,
Yeah.
right? Or many years ago, or these ghosts of people that are in the space. And what do you do about that?
Yeah. So I think we can see people in general in a couple different camps. We have people that, and let's just talk right now about death specifically, understanding that grief is a process that can deal with many kinds of loss. But let's just talk about death, because you brought up the holidays, and we've got traditions that we do, and it's supposed to be this joyful time, and often it's a really stressful time, and often there's a lot of grief, and it's not this happy, light filled thing. It's a really dark time. Suicide rates go way up around the holidays. I had a friend who committed suicide between Christmas and New Year's. It's it's a rough time.
Mhm.
Um, so I just want to acknowledge that it's a rough time. So if you're feeling it, I've had people reach out to me and direct message me, a couple different people, like, hey, this week is hitting me really hard. Can I get a one-off session? I know you don't usually do that. I need support. And there are people that somebody dies and they move through it and they're able to still celebrate. And there are other people that go through a death and it can be 18 years later. And I had a woman who said, my son died 18 years ago. I'm still carrying around a bag of bricks. So, we have this concept of time, like, okay, someone dies and I should be over it in 6 weeks, or I should be over it in a year. I should be over it and back to myself in this exact amount of time. And I don't know where we got that idea, but um, it's just like, maternity leave. I should only need 3 months and then my child is good and I should be back to work, right? We just make these constructs of I should be X in this amount of time. And I just would encourage people to let that go, of like getting over it in X amount of time. So grief runs slowly. So really our human mammalian bodies run slower than technology does.
Mhm.
Our clock that we set up in the industrial age, once we started running trains and we got to be on time for the train, life sped up. That's only been like 100 years or something, 150 years. And before that, it was like you woke up, it was like on mealtime, right? Like we had a meal and the sun was here, and then we had a meal and then it was dark and we went to sleep, but once we have electricity and we have trains and we have this clock, we're not meant to run as fast as life is going. So I just want to acknowledge that one of my values is slow. Like I really value slowing down and giving ourselves more spaciousness.
Yes.
That is healing. So slow equals healing. Um, when we look at trauma, and I know, you have such an extensive background with all that you do, but I like there's like a one definition of trauma I heard was too much, too fast, too soon.
Yeah. That's
So
where I'm gonna come, I think.
yeah, yeah. So it's like if trauma is too much, too fast, too soon, then to the antidote might be less, slow, and space. Like, how can we have more space, move slower, and do less? And that will mitigate, the impact of challenging, painful, traumatic experience. And actually make some experiences not traumatic. Like, for example, I'm totally going off on a tangent, but I think it's important because I want to say it. In one of the death doula trainings I went through, it was with Final Passages and Jerry Grace Lyons, and she kept telling these stories about the families that really successfully moved through the death of their loved one were the ones that had enough time to say goodbye. So, for example, at the hospital, it wasn't like, oh, it's got to be X amount of hours, 4 hours, and then the body's got to go. And then they're at the funeral home. And then, you got to say goodbye and it's got to be done. So when things are rushed, it's traumatic, right? But if there's actually no law, we think, oh, that's the law. No, that's the care facility's policy. There's no law. The law is you have the right, if you're the power of attorney health, you actually have the legal right to take your mother out of the care facility and bring her home and have as much time as you need with her. They tell you, it's you have to move her out in 4 hours and she's got to go to the funeral home. No, that's just policy. That's the policy. But the law is you actually have the right to take her home and say goodbye in whatever way you want and have 3 days, 4 days, 7 days. And people are afraid of that. Like, well, what's the dead body going to do? But if you have somebody to help hold the space for you, you can put your relative on some ice and they can just hang out for a few days. And then family can come and kids can come and dogs and cats and, people can come and be with the body of someone. Like we're like elephants, those beautiful, like videos. I'm just imagining these elephants coming around, their relative that died and mourning. Like we're like that, we're meant to do that. And I know the relatives in my family that died and I didn't see their body, which is most of them, you know. There was like this kind of void, like this weird, where did Grampy go? Where did Angie go? Where did they go? And I got to spend time with my dad, and that was very healing. So I'm coming back to the we're missing people at the holidays, but I just want to say that slow is healing. And if we can have more time with our loved one, and that is one phrase that I give my clients that is so powerful. If you're for example, if you have a family member that is in the hospital and maybe they're going on hospice, or maybe they're at end of life, and you have to make a decision, like, are we going to have this procedure or not? Or are we going to do this or not? Most things are not like you have to decide this second, right? If there's a conversation with a doctor, you probably have a good hour of time. Like most things are not emergency things, especially if you're at end of life, especially if you have a disease, right? Process. So one statement that I learned that is so powerful is like, could we have a little more time with that? That's it. Like, practice that phrase. Can we have a little more time with that? And whenever it's the nurse or the doctor, hey, we have to make a decision. Are we going to do X or not? Can we have a little more time with that? And just give yourself the grace of a little more time with that. And that reduces the impact. It makes the experience less traumatic because it gives you more power. It gives you more space. You can move slower and you can have some breath to make decisions. And it doesn't feel like it's out of control.
Yeah.
And then you don't go back and go, oh gosh, was that the right decision? I mean, I made it so quick. I said yes, but maybe, right? So that is just really powerful. So I'm saying this because there's some of us that move through the loss, the death of people, and we write books and we do all these creative things and we celebrate them on the holidays and we're grateful and we seem to be really successful. And then there are other people that have, it's been years and I can't get over it. And I will say, you asked me the question, what do you do? Right? That that finding some practices, some rituals around how can I stay connected to this person who's no longer here in the human physical form? How can I potentially be open? And we can have all different belief systems around, what the heck happens to us after we die, right? And whether you believe someone's energy or spirit goes on, or whether you believe in reincarnation, or whether you believe in, that your ancestors are hanging out with you or not, wherever you are on that spectrum, right, of belief system, you can still feel connected to this person that has died by doing some things on an everyday basis or a ritualistic basis. And when I say ritual, that doesn't mean religious, it doesn't mean spiritual, it doesn't mean, ritual is anything that you do with an intentional, regular practice, right? I have a teeth brushing ritual, a flossing ritual, right? So it doesn't need to be something that a priest does or a minister or a thing. You yourself and your family can decide, hey, what would be really meaningful is, you know, so and so is no longer with us, but they really loved fishing or surfing, or, they were an artist or they whatever. How about we create a little space for them, an honoring space? You could call it an altar or just a table or something. And why don't we put their picture and a candle and some flowers? And because they were an artist, let's all do a little collage over the holiday, right? To honor them. And then we'll show each other and we'll tell some stories about them. That is healing. That makes the holidays like we're not trying to forget that they existed. We're weaving them in, even though they're not physically here with us. And that way our hearts are still connected and we're still open to the flow of love. And that is something we can do over the holidays.
No, that's amazing. I have a friend who just lost her mother last month. And
Mm.
so, yeah, this is the first Thanksgiving that she's having without her.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that that's a really important thing to consider is like, how can you bring in the energy of that person, what they represented to you and your family and in your heart? How can you bring that in? And I even think about my aunt who passed away several years ago. And I have this knowing that, she really valued her family Bible and like, felt like her family Bible wasn't being cared for properly. And like, how could we bring that into our family gathering space that we're going to have in a couple of days at my sister's house? Like, how can we bring in some of that acknowledgement of those things, or my father who passed away, or my grandfather who passed away? Like, so many people, that we used to have in our lives are no longer here.
Yeah.
Or I have a friend who has, I lost my goddaughter. My best friend's daughter passed away. Like, she was very young, and so to have that loss and to be, 5, 6 years away from that loss, but still feel it so raw.
Yeah.
These are all meaningful things to consider. How do we bring them back into our hearts, into these gatherings?
Yeah. Yeah. It can be so tender, especially when like your goddaughter, somebody so young, or, there's just sort of the untimely death, right? It's not our grandmother that's in their 90s and peacefully passes from old age. When it's a more traumatic, unexpected, or the death of somebody young, it's just so much more challenging. And I think if we can take action, so people say, time, you hear that time heals all wounds, right? It's not necessarily the time, it's what you do with that time. It's the actions that you take in that time.
Mm.
So if you can say like, wow, this person really loved X, like you talked about the family Bible, and okay, so what do we need to do? Do we give it a new cover, or do we put a special velvet fabric for it? Do we read out of it? And, maybe their favorite passage or something. So, and then I see people that are really thriving even after really traumatic losses of children and things, that because they set up a foundation. Like, we set up a scholarship fund, we set up this thing, we're connecting. They loved rescue dogs, so we're going to do this whole rescue dog initiative, right? When you like take what they love and you go, they would love it if I really took that on and I did some good in the world in alignment with what they loved. And maybe I named the scholarship fund after them, or I named the rescue dog initiative, or whatever it is. Then you're honoring them, you're carrying their energy forward, and you're also doing something. You're taking beautiful action in the world that keeps the flow of life and love open, and it opens it up in a new way. Like, if you think of a stream, when somebody dies, or when we're like, we get like um frozen, it's like a dam. It's like, I don't know where to put the love, especially if it's like, this was my partner and we were married for all these years and we did everything together. Now what do I do with that energy? Like, what do I do at the breakfast table? What do I do for vacation, because we always did the same thing or whatever? So it's like, how part of the healing is, how do I keep that energy moving forward, but I have to do it in new ways. Like, the stream is not so big, but I need to keep the energy moving, the life force moving, the love moving, and I just need to open up different channels for it. And it's going to look different. But if I can keep that flow happening, then that is a healing act.
Well, you just touched something in me, because I'm gushing over here just thinking about the idea of bringing forth, some work in the world that is in honor of the people that we lost. I think that that's such a beautiful idea, and one that I could see happening in honor of a lot of different people in my life who have done a lot of really beautiful things.
Yeah.
So thank
And
you for that.
yeah, and it just came out of my mouth. None of this was anything that I didn't think to prepare what I wanted to say, when we got together just now. And now that I said that, I'm thinking my aunt Angie has come in recently, like pretty strongly. I wrote a 2-page poem to her the other day, and thinking about how she wanted to live life maybe in a different way, and she didn't have the avenues. And my message from her is like, you figure that out. You don't wear suits, you don't play by the book, you're doing it different, you're doing it your own way. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do that. So I'm remembering her, not for her addiction at the end of her life or her mental illness, but like remembering the real her. And those things that I've been able to do. It's like, yeah, I can dedicate this New Year's Eve workshop to her. Like, it's inspiring me to do that also. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a workshop coming up the day after Thanksgiving, correct?
Yeah, I've got so I decided to do the last 7 weeks of the year, a 7-part series called Reclaiming Joy Through the Dark.
Mhm.
Because if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, this is literally a dark time, right? We've got the shortest day of the year, the longest night on, the solstice week, the winter solstice. And then also, because of the holidays, there's just a lot of grief and a lot of personal darkness that a lot of people are moving through. And then also we have the grief of the world. We have, what's going on in the world, and war and genocide and things like that, that people are just sort of, what else can I possibly do? I've signed a petition, I've sent some money, and I feel helpless and hopeless. So one of the ways that we can um, keep living is remembering the joy inside of us, our true nature, and not like keep affirming life, in general. Keep affirming our lives, keep affirming the life of others. I listened to a poet who was from Afghanistan the other day, and she had these gorgeous, heartbreaking, tragic, but also beautiful poems of Palestine. And she was saying, don't let the systems and the structures let you feel separate. You know, you got to stay connected and connected with your joy, you know, and affirming of your own life and everyone's life, like life in general. So I think that that's really important to decide where we want to set our inner compass. And joy can feel really frivolous, and people can be like, what do you mean joy? You know, it's like all of this terrible stuff is happening or all this, but it's like, no, we have to keep our light on. And happiness can sort of float by, like, oh, I'm surprised by this kind gesture from someone or this hummingbird, right? There's like moments of joy, but then we can also cultivate joy on a regular basis, right? With daily rituals. Like, okay, you know I'm joyful if I sing or I dance or I write or well, like what brings me joy? Let me make sure I do that every day. So we can be really powerful creators of remembering our own joy, reclaiming our own joy. So that feels really important right now. And in this darkest time of the year. So that's a long intro to, yes, one of our Reclaiming Joy sessions is this Friday. I decided to do that put it on Black Friday. There's a lot of sort of shopping frenzy, you know, the day after Thanksgiving, at least in the United States. And to really counter that with something that is beautiful and creative and prayerful, where we can put our hopes and our desires and our prayers and our gratitude. So I'm bringing in my friend Ellen Kittredge, who I've known for over 10 years, and she and I just went to Peru together this summer, and we're bringing in a despacho, creating in the traditional Quero High Andes tradition, creating a despacho, which is this sort of physical expression of beauty, where you bring seeds and fruit and flowers and cotton balls, and you create this 3-tiered despacho to offer to the earth. And our teachers have said, if everyone on the planet were to make an offering like this every week of the year, there would be no war. Like, war could not happen. Mm. Because we'd be in such aini, such sacred reciprocity. There would be so much flow that war couldn't flourish. So I feel like this is a type of activism. You know, it's a type of showing up for yourself, for your family, and for the world, to create beauty and create prayer in your own way. So, you know, it's open to everyone of every religious background, every spiritual background. It's a very welcoming tradition. They pass these practices freely and ask us to practice them and share them freely. So, you know, anyone who might be worried about, well, is that cultural appropriation? Are we taking this? No, it's please practice this. You know, we want everyone in the world to practice this. So it's a way to make physical and beautiful your hopes and your joy and your prayer.
And this is virtual. It's
virtual.
So people can tap in.
You can tap in wherever you are in the world. We made it both European and North American, South American friendly. It's 10 a.m. Pacific time. Mm-hmm. That's 1 o'clock Eastern on Friday, this Friday, November 29th. Yes, it is the 29th, the day after American Thanksgiving. Yeah. So we're calling it a gratitude ritual and nature offering.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely put the link down in the chat for anyone who's interested in participating. I think it's a beautiful practice. I'll see if my family is into sharing that practice with us, because I think that'd be so cool for us to do it virtually with you, but also have our family gathering be a part of that.
Absolutely. And I've had, you know, some of the folks in the Grace Collective are like, well, let me check in and see if my house guests are into that, you know, kind of thing, where it's like, yeah, this is for, you know, all ages. You can have your elders participate. You can have your kids love it. They get to like sprinkle sugar on apples and flowers. And, you know, it's fun. It's physical. It's tangible. And, you know, people really get into it. it's really, there's nothing I'd rather be doing.
List or something we need to have ahead of time? Do you
Yes,
send
there's a
it to us?
list. There's a
Okay.
list. So I updated the landing page. So it's part of this 7-week series, and people can just drop into that. So they don't have to come to anything else.
Mhm,
But then if they want to come in December for the Thursday sessions, the Reclaiming Joy sessions, they can.
mhm,
But they could just drop into one session. They can just come on Friday. And on the page, there's a list of the things to bring. And then in the reminder, in the registration email and the reminder emails, I have a list as well. So um, it's not a lot of things, but there are a few things together, like cotton balls, apple seeds, apples you cut up, flowers, sugar. So there's a few things to gather.
yeah,
And we're gonna have a lot of fun. So
awesome.
yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Jen.
Yeah.
It's so great to have you here, and I'm so grateful that you're able to share your time and your wisdom with us in our community. And there's so much more to dive deep into. We'll have to have you back and continue the conversation.
Yeah, this was so rich. Thank you so much for having me in your community. I'm just super grateful.
Is there a way that you would like people to stay in touch, website address or anything like that?
Yeah, so we can put, so I'll just say this, if you're interested in coming on Friday for the gratitude ritual and nature offering with Ellen and I, you can register for that. That's by donation. There's a suggested donation, but you can literally donate $1, so any amount of donation is great. And then when you do that, you'll be on my email list. If you
Okay.
don't want to stay on my email list, you can unsubscribe, if you don't want to get other things from me. I do send out emails like with I curate, podcast recommendations, movies, series, like my favorite. I've shared like my 3 favorite movies of 2024 in an e-newsletter. So there, it's not just like buy this. I'll offer you something yummy. So if you do register for that, you'll get on my list.
Mhm.
If you are a big Facebook person, I also have a Facebook group called Grief and Grace that you can join. Um, and my website and my podcast are both called Walk Through Grief with Grace, so you can check out the podcast. And if you get on the main page of the website, there is like if you're not interested in Friday but you want to stay in touch, there's a grief guide that you can download, and that'll get you also on my e-newsletter list if you want to stay in touch but you're not interested at all in coming on Friday. So
Thank
that
you
was
so much.
that was a lot of options, but
That's okay. I'm going to drop the link in the chat, and people will opt in as they will. But I love that they have the opportunity to check in with you, because there's a lot of people in my life that have around the holiday losses that they're working through right now. And so just being able to offer them something, I think, is super powerful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I would love to meet anyone who's listening to this um, on Friday. And if you do need like just a one-off support, I usually don't offer private sessions, but the month of December I am, because it's a
Yeah.
rough time. So I'm here for folks if they're like, hey, I could use a little SOS,
Yeah.
I'm around.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Adhana.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye.